Hi everyone, my name is Joe, and I'm a freelance developer relations consultant going by the name Interactive. I help companies with developer-facing products build out their developer communities in a way that is mutually beneficial to both sides, so helps both the company and the users. Prior to going freelance, I worked at GitHub leading the student programs, so I worked primarily on GitHub Student Developer Pack and the GitHub Campus Experts. And before that, I worked at a number of companies doing developer advocacy, like Improbable and PayPal. The first question is, how did I get into developer relations? So I got my start through hackathons, and kind of two things happened at the same time. So whilst I was in uni, I got really into hackathons. In student hackathon, well, originally just hackathons in general, and there were no student hackathons in the UK at the time, really. And so me and a bunch of students from my uni were going to hackathons and meeting great people, and especially developer evangelists and developer advocates. So I got kind of my intro to what DevRel was from a lot of those hackathons, things like Over the Air, things like Hack Manchester, things like PayPal Battle Hack, and that's important. And so at the same time we were going to those, we were also trying to start organizing student hackathons. So myself and three others ended up starting Major League Hacking UK, which was kind of one half of my early DevRel experience. And then the other half, I got to know the PayPal team who ran Battle Hack and became their intern, a developer advocate intern one summer. And so there was kind of this period of a year, 2 years, where I was both a developer advocate, kind of like starting out with PayPal, whilst also helping Major League Hacking get set up in the UK and Europe with their student hackathons. And so that was where it started. I stayed at PayPal for a little bit as a developer advocate, and then did developer advocacy at a couple of other companies before taking that kind of education experience from Major League Hacking combined with the developer relations experience on PayPal and joining GitHub to do the student advocacy programs over there. What advice would I give to people looking to join? Yeah, super great question. I guess it depends on what looking to join means. Like, are you fresh? Are you like early career, fresh out of school, fresh out of whichever ever path you've taken to start your career, or is it, you're an experienced and seasoned developer looking to change in? For the former group, the folks coming in, from university, etc., there is not a whole bunch of early career opportunities in DevRel. There's not a whole lot of internships. There's not a whole lot of junior roles, but that is changing. So I guess the advice I'd give here is, let's stick with it. There are increasingly programs and companies who are starting to bring juniors onto their team. There's a number of really great, well-known developer relations teams, Fire Advocates, Twilio, for example, the GitHub team. Loads of folks now are starting to bring up these roles. But I guess my other advice to those folks, find ways you can develop the skill set that align with what you are able to like what may be more accessible roles. So like if you end up in an engineering role, what internal work can you do that builds up that skill set, builds up that reputation? Are there any like open source projects that you can help with documentation? Are there any internal talks or places you can build your public speaking skills? Are there any meetup groups in the area around you that you have time and interest in supporting? You don't have developer relations isn't something you need to go into straight out of school, and it's very common for people to make that jump later on in life. So don't feel like you need to do that straight away. There's a lot of value and a lot of fun in building your skills elsewhere. And for folks who are coming in a little bit later, I think the one piece of advice I would give is that it's a really interesting time to join DevRel. Things are changing a lot. Lots of old assumptions and ways of doing things are being broken down. Lots of things that lots of individual DevRel people struggle with or have struggled with over the years, like the hectic travel schedule and the burnout and tiredness that causes, are starting to be questioned because of 2020. So I would say don't be afraid to really bring something different and to talk about what you bring that's different and the ideas that you have. And if there's ever a year where having less experience with traditional DevRel is more of a strength than an advantage, it would be this year. So lean into the unique things that you bring as you're doing your job search. Then, how has my role changed in the past year? So I'm going to go a little bit longer than past year because nothing's really changed in the past year, but stuff has changed in the past 2 years. So early 2019 is when I left GitHub and went freelance. And that was a huge shift for me. I'd only ever been, employed as long as I've done um, DevRel, and going freelance was a lot of adjustments in a lot of ways. But not just in how I charge and find work, but in what work I do, and how I think about myself and what things I'm good at. The biggest thing for me in going into freelance DevRel was, so like lots of DevRel people are kind of Swiss Army knives, right? Like we're technical, we do speaking, we can organize events. There's like all kinds of skills that DevRel people have. Or sorry, all kinds of, I guess to put it literally, all kinds of skills that DevRel people use every day. One of the things I realized was that a lot of the things that were reasonable for me to do as a salaried employee were not necessarily things that I felt happy charging for as a freelancer, because although I think I'm good at those things, they're not necessarily things that I am efficient at. So like writing blog posts is a great example of this, where I used to have to write blog posts, as a lot of developer advocates do, for work, and that makes sense. Like, I was in a position where I was the person who was called to do that, and when you're a salaried employee, like the time pressures are a little bit different. Whereas as a freelancer, especially when I'm charging by the hour, I can produce a good blog post, but like maybe it takes me a couple of hours longer than a technical writer would do. And so that's one of those things where I had to sit down and say, like, am I comfortable in myself charging an hourly rate for this work that I don't think I'm especially efficient at doing, even if I think the outcome is good? And so there were lots of things that I used to do in my day to day as a full-time salaried person that I think I've done good work with over the years in different companies that I now no longer do as a freelancer, because of that, I guess, shift from like, can I do it versus can I do it quickly and efficiently? So I think that would be the biggest change. And then obviously the other main change is I now work for a whole heap of companies instead of one. And that's really interesting because I get to the toolkit and the frameworks I've built up over the last couple of years in terms of how I think about DevRel and how I think about communities. I've got to test and try those in a whole bunch of different settings, and have those, have my assumptions challenged very, very regularly, because I work with, 5, 10, 12 companies a year, and often many in a month. And so I think it's helped me grow and change my toolkit very, very quickly. Final question. How do I see the future of DevRel? What a question. As much as this year has sucked, especially for our industry, a very travel, very event-based industry, and I know lots of DevRel folks are struggling with that and are struggling to find satisfaction with their work this year, or worrying about the value of their work this year. I do think that this year, and what the de-emphasis on physical events has done, will hopefully do for our industry, will be very positive. I think one of my frustrations with DevRel as an industry is we go in circles on a lot of the same questions a lot of the time. And for any of you watching who know me, that won't be a surprise to you. I whinge about this on Twitter constantly. But one of those is, metrics and measurement. We go in circles on that all the time, where we're constantly asking how do we measure ourselves, despite the fact that that question really should have been answered to death by now. And I think this year, where we've been forced to address that and to find new ways of providing value on, like, the scale of the entire industry, I think that will hopefully break that cycle a little bit and get us into a place where we have more effective tools in our belt, different things that we can do that we know work. We're not as reliant on physical events and the flying. We've found alternatives where they make sense. And I think this is also really important because, just before this kicked off, we were as an industry starting to have important conversations about, the climate impact of flying everywhere. And so I think, as much as it sucks, it did come at a good time where it probably forced us to find answers to a lot of challenges that otherwise we wouldn't have done. So I think the future is very positive, and I think it's going to be a lot less manic, a lot less wasteful, and hopefully a lot more principled. Thank you so much for listening to my little ramble. Hope you enjoy the rest of your 2020 and have a very happy holiday.